Okay, hello, let's take a look at the simple multiplier. This is part of economic growth, one of our 6 economic issues in the HSC course. So when there is an increase in any of the components of aggregate demand, be it consumption, investment, government spending, any of these components, the final increase in GDP will actually be multiplied. And what it gets multiplied, we call the simple multiplier. It gets multiplied by the simple multiplier, or K. So the simple expenditure multiplier is the extent to which an initial change in the components of aggregate demand, such as consumption, will lead to a larger change in national income, or GDP, and this will generate economic growth. So it's important to understand this to understand the causes of economic growth. So the amount is known as the multiplier K, and the size of the multiplier, or K, is determined by the marginal propensity to save. And we remember this from year 11, which we'll look on the next slide. So the formula for K is 1 over MPS, marginal propensity to save, or it can also be written as K equals 1 over 1 minus MPC, or marginal propensity to consume. So our marginal propensity to consume is the MPC, and it's a proportion of an extra dollar of income that is spent or consumed. So we remember this, we're recalling this from year 11. Marginal propensity to save is the proportion of an extra dollar of income that will be saved. So if I give you an extra dollar, how much of it will you save? How much of it will you spend? And it can be written that MPS plus MPC equals 1. And we also know that out of your income, you can either spend it or save it. So that gives us this formula here as well. Income equals C plus S. So for an example, if your MPS is 0.2, then the MPC must be 0.8 because they'll equal to 1. So if I was going to give you an extra dollar, that means this person is going to save 20 cents and consume 80 cents. So any increase in an element of aggregate demand will lead to a multiplied increase in GDP, and we can create this formula that the change in Y, the national income or the change in GDP, is going to equal K times the change in aggregate demand. This seems kind of complicated at first, the simple multiplier topic, but once you start to try a few examples, it just gets easier and easier, and it feels great when you understand it. So K times change in aggregate demand. And we know our components of aggregate demand are here. So that if we increase any of these, they will increase aggregate demand, but we know that needs to get multiplied because increasing, say, consumption by 100 won't just increase GDP by 100. This is going to get multiplied as it moves through the economy. And if there's a greater multiplier, there'll be a greater increase in GDP, and so a greater increase in economic growth. We also know that if there's a higher MPC, if people are more likely to consume any extra money that they have, there'll be a higher multiplier, so there'll be more economic growth. So this is also an important thing to understand, the impact of having a higher marginal propensity to consume. If people are consuming more, then there'll be more economic growth. So let's have a look at an example. If investment in an economy increases by $10,000, what is the change in national income? If in this economy, the MPC equals 0.8. So they've given us the MPC, they've given us the change in a component of aggregate demand, being investment, $10,000. We can plug that into the formula and work this out. So we need these two formulas. We've got K equals 1 over MPS. That can also be written as K over 1 minus MPC. So in this example, MPC is 0.8. So MPS is going to equal 0.2. So K equals 1 over 0.2. So K equals 5. So we can then put this into the next formula. Change in national income equals K times the change in aggregate demand. So we know K is 5, and we know the change in aggregate demand here is $10,000. 5 times 10,000, $50,000. So the initial change in aggregate demand has been multiplied by 5. That was the simple multiplier. So the change in national income, or the change in GDP in this economy, is $50,000 from only an increase in investment of 10,000. Let's take a look at another one. We need to memorize these formulas, so let's keep writing them down. So let's say if the marginal propensity to consume in an economy is 0.8 and investment increases by 100 billion, what is the change in national income? And this is sometimes how these questions are written out. So your MPC is, in this example, is 0.8. The change in aggregate demand is 100. We need to work out what does Y equal. So use those formulas. Again, if the MPC is 0.8, K is going to equal 5. Y equals K times change in aggregate demand. So Y equals 5 times 100. So the change in national income in the end tier is $500 billion. So it's pretty straightforward when we look at it like that. But what you'll find is that in questions, they'll change the information that they give you. So in this instance, if GDP in year 1 is 100, government expenditure increases by 5. This is our change in aggregate demand. MPC equals 0.66 and MPS then must equal 0.33. What information have we got here? We've got the initial income, we've got the change in aggregate demand, and if we've got MPC, we can work out K. So we need to work out what is going to be the change in that national income. So K equals 1 over MPS. K is going to equal 3 in this instance, so 1 over 0.33. So K equals 3. So the multiplied impact of that increase in government expenditure is going to equal K times the increase in G. So the increase in G was 5, K is 3, so 15 is going to be our increase in national income or GDP. We can call it national income, we can call it GDP, we can call it an increase in aggregate demand. It all means the same thing. So in this economy, GDP started out as 100, the government spent 5, and the final change in GDP wasn't 105. It wasn't only an increase of 5, it was multiplied. And what we can also see from this is that if we have a higher marginal propensity to consume, K will be higher, so the final increase in growth will be higher. So when a government needs to understand what the MPC or the MPS is if they want to boost growth in an economy and stimulate economic growth. So this is a past paper 1, 2012 HSC, this is question 19. So in the end of the multiple choice. So an increase in investment of $5,000 increases the equilibrium level of national income by $20,000. What is the marginal propensity to consume? So it's going the other way. It's asking for the MPC. It's given us investment and it's giving us the change in national income. Those are your two formulas. Hit pause and try this question yourself right now. Okay, let's check it out. How'd you go with this question? So an increase in investment of $5,000, that's your change in aggregate demand, and the change in Y is going to be 20,000. So 20,000, if we put that into the formula, equals K times 5,000. So if our, so K is going to equal 4, 5,000 times 4 is 20,000, K equals 4, K equals 1 over MPS. We put that 4 back into the, we use that 4 to work out the MPS. And if 4 is 1 over 0.25, then MPC is going to be 0.75. So we've worked out the marginal propensity to consume. We've just had to do everything backwards and go back the other way by just substituting into those formulas. So these are your questions from your textbook. Again, have a read, hit pause, try these questions out yourself, and then we'll check the answers in a sec. So hit pause now. Okay, let's see how you went. So the following values for a hypothetical economy, they're all in the millions of dollars. S is 50, G is 30, X is 10, M is 10, C is 40, I is 15, and MPC is 0.8. So they've given us a lot of information there. We recognize our components of aggregate demand here. AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. We need to memorize that. So if I plug them in, that's going to tell me aggregate demand is 85. Sorry, that's meant to be a minus there, 10 minus 10. I don't like typing out calculations. So 40 plus 15 plus 30, just by substituting these in, it's going to give us 85. The value of the multiplier, we can work that out from the MPC. If we have MPC or MPS, we know the multiplier. So K equals 1 over MPS. I like this one because it's a little bit easier than 1 minus MPC. So I'll just convert the 0.8 MPC is going to be an MPS of 0.2. So 1 over 0.2, again, it's 5. We keep getting K of 5 at the moment. Then if the government wants to increase national income by 25 million, how much should they increase their own spending levels? It's pretty easy when K is 5 to see this. So plug it in. 25 million equals K times the change in aggregate demand. K is 5. We know that from question B. They're going to need to spend $5 million. So 25 million divided by 5. We put that on the other side, and it's going to be 5 million. So the government should increase government spending by 5 million. So again, we can see if the government knows what their goal is in the end, they need to increase national income by a certain amount. They need to know the simple multiplier, and they need to know the MPC in order to work out how much they need to actually spend. They don't have to spend $25 million because they know it's going to get multiplied. They only need to spend 5 million, and they need to be able to predict and budget these changes. So then this was the question 2. Suppose that an economy, a $40 million increase in consumption leads to a $200 million increase in national income. Calculate their MPS. So this is again going the other way. They've given you the change in aggregate demand. They've given you the change in national income. Write the formula. 200 million equals K times 40. So we've got the change in Y and the change in AD. We don't have K. We need to find K, and then we'll be able to find the MPS. So plug it in. 200 divided by the 40 equals 5. So K equals 5. So K equals 1 over our MPS. So 1 over 5 is 0.2. 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. So we worked out K using these two parts here, and then we can use that to work out our MPS. Cool. This is a little bit fuzzy, I'm afraid, but this is from 2013, question 15. Another multiple choice HSC question. There's a decline in the MPC. Which combination of changes in the simple multiplier and equilibrium income is most likely to result? So without even looking at this bottom section here, if MPC declines, we know the simple multiplier will be smaller and there'll be a smaller increase in economic growth. So it's going to be bad for the multiplier. It's going to be bad for economic growth if we have less consumption in the economy. So people are saving their money more for some reason. So without even looking at the answers, we know the simple multiplier will decrease and equilibrium income will most likely decrease as a result as well. Yep, that's correct. B and B. Simple multiplier will decrease and equilibrium decreases. If you want to check it, just write out your formula for K and try two different MPCs, a higher MPC and a lower one, like 0.8 and compared to 0.6 will give you a different multiplier. Okay, last one to pause and try yourself. In a hypothetical economy, MPC equals 0.9. So our marginal propensity to consume 0.9. What is the change in national income if investment declines by $100 million? So hit pause, try it yourself. Again, write your formulas down to help memorize them. Okay, so MPC is 0.9. We know that K is going to equal 1 over MPS. So it's going to equal 1 over 0.1 because the MPS will be 0.1 if MPC is 0.9. So 1 over 0.1. So K is going to equal 10. That's a big multiplier. So the change in national income that it's asking for is going to equal K times change in aggregate demand. it's going to equal our multiplier of 10 times negative 100 million, because the AD is declining by 100 million. So 10 times negative 100 million. So the change in Y is going to be negative 1 billion. So the change in national income is $1 billion. Easy 1 mark. Okay, so for this last slide, can you read the textbook of Dixon and Mahoney for pages 167 to 170, where we review the simple multiplier? Answer this question 24B, handwrite it out yourself, explain how changes in the MPC can affect an economy's growth. Then, to also make yourself a little bit more accountable and kind of individual, that you can follow this up yourself, check your answer from the HSC 2016 marking guidelines and see how you go. So we want to be able to check those answers ourselves. Sometimes if we're doing some of our own revision on past papers, once you do the question yourself, then make sure you know where to find the marking guidelines so you can check that. There'll be a suggested answer and there'll be a little explanation of what you needed to do for full marks, and it'll tell you as well what your answer could include. Cool. Thanks for listening.